stalactites, folks, are not in the depths of Hidden River Cave, but we're here in the American Cave Museum. Dave is going to tell us a little bit about the establishment of the museum. What's the vision for this place and how did it come about?
Well, when the American Cave Conservation Association first got invited to come to Horse Cave, you know, we were here to try to restore Hidden River Cave, to try to bring it back to life. We weren't really sure if we could even accomplish that. But the one thing we knew was having a big cave right in the middle of town was a pretty big interpretive exhibit, especially speaking to one of our causes, which is protecting groundwater and preventing water pollution. And so we felt like we needed an interpretive center, we needed a museum, we needed an educational center at the cave entrance that would teach people about these things, whether we ever got the cave back. And so we had this vision for a national museum of caves, and there wasn't anything like this anywhere in the country. And so we simply set up shop here and began raising money, approaching foundations, approaching various government sources of. We got funding from the federal government, from the state government, from private foundations, from people that would just stop in off the street and like the vision and write a check, and it was amazing. It took a long time. It's taken us 20 years to build this place, and it's still not finished. But right now it's the largest cave museum in the United States. There's several smaller museums in different places.
And by the way, the population of Horse Cave is only around 2,500 or something like that, right?
Exactly.
And yet you have the largest cave museum in the United States. Could you show us some exhibits, some highlights of the museum?
Sure, but we have a lot of exhibits on various topics such as karst geology, the groundwater system.
Like right here, you're looking at the landscape of South Central Kentucky.
Exactly. This is a cutaway of what the land looks like underneath your feet. You know, most people when they think about the earth, they think in two-dimensional terms. There's the sky up above and there's the land that we're on. When you deal with groundwater, you're thinking really in three dimensions. There's also this dimension underneath the earth, and it affects a lot of what we do on the surface. It affects the kind of soils that we have, it affects how we get rid of our waste and our contaminations, where our water comes from. Here in this type of terrain that we call karst, we have these things like sinkholes that drain, that have dissolved the limestone rock, and because they're round and deep, they look like trash cans, and people use them as trash cans.
That's right.
But they're trash cans with holes in the bottom. So that trash doesn't stay there. If you dump trash in a sinkhole, it goes somewhere. Well, where does it go? It goes through the cave, follows the cave stream, and eventually comes back out on the surface through what we call a spring. And virtually every major spring in the world is tied to this type of system, a karst system.
That's right, and people are obviously watering livestock with that, watering themselves.
Exactly, yeah. So this farmer that's up here, if he has a dead horse or a dead cow and throws it in that sinkhole, and somebody's down here getting their drinking water out of the spring,
bad news.
You've got a problem.
We've got more on the way. So what was the museum before it was a museum? This looks like an old factory of some kind.
This was a spike building. Know what a spike building is?
No. Stay tuned. So this is an extensive museum. We're down on not the ground level, but we're actually on the lower level.
Yes.
And there's enough stuff. People could spend a lot of time looking at these text-heavy, very informative exhibits. What are we looking at right here?
Well, we have a lot of exhibits in the museum on cave animals, on uses of caves and history of caves, but specifically a lot on groundwater conservation. And you know, when I first came to Horse Cave, I had people that were telling me, there's no point in trying to clean up the cave here. It's a waste of time. It's been polluted as long as we can remember. You'll never get it fixed. The cool thing is we're here 20 years later, and this is what we have. You can go in the cave. We have this beautiful museum. It's a groundwater success story. And here's an exhibit that shows what Horse Cave was like when we first moved here. The only animals living in the cave were sewage bacteria and sewage worms. And now we have blind fish, blind crayfish, natural cave animals. So we have allowed the cave to recover. And what's really cool is this is an environmental issue with solutions. You know, we see so many of the big issues today are things like climate change and the ozone hole and things that people can't get their heads around because they say, well, what can we really do? Well, these are issues that have really practical solutions. Stop dumping things into sinkholes. Think about recycling your waste and think about what you put into the ground. And we can fix most of these problems. And not only take care of nature, but take care of ourselves in the process.
It's a very valuable museum that you all have here. We should learn not to dump our automobiles into sinkholes or dead animals into sinkholes or, you know, dump our motor oil out onto the driveway, etc. Right. So I've got a taste of the museum, and now I guess you're going to show me Hidden River Cave?
Yeah, let's go down and go caving.
Let's do it. So what was the museum before it was a museum? This looks like an old factory of some kind.
This was a spite building. You know what a spite building is?
No.
Back in the early days of Horse Cave, there were two prominent business leaders. One was Dr. Harry Thomas, who was the cave operator. He purchased the cave and was interested in developing the cave and wanted to turn all this nice land around the cave into a nice community park. And then there was Clarence Owens, who owned the old railroad hotel across the railroad tracks. And for some reason, Clarence and Harry didn't get along very well. They hated each other's guts. There's a story about the two of them having a knife fight on the street and literally Clarence sticking Harry with a knife.
Well, that's not funny.
Dr. Thomas, with the cave owner, beat Mr. Owens up on the street after Mr. Owens stuck Dr. Thomas with the knife. And they, Clarence Owens went to Louisville to recover from his injuries and sued Dr. Thomas for beating him up. And Dr. Thomas hired a private investigator and found out that while Clarence Owens wasn't in a hospital recovering from his injuries, he was actually in a house of ill repute that he owned. And
the good old days, right?
Yeah, but anyway, to make a long story short,
so the doctor was developing this.
Dr. Thomas was developing the cave. Harry Thomas was developing the cave, and Clarence Owens, the railroad guy, managed to get hold of this corner of the property and built the building here out of spite. So we call it our spite building.
To interfere with the cave and the beauty of the tourism.
More Go Local is coming up.
We don't even know how Horse Cave got its name. It may have been just because the word horse means big.
Like Hoss.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't want to miss this.
I've been into the mouth of another grand cave called Mammoth, and I think this looks to be like a steeper initial drop than going into that big mouth there, the historic entrance there.
Yeah, it's a very big cave. It's we're certainly we're not quite on the scope that Mammoth Cave is, but this is a very large cave. We've explored more than 10 miles of cave passage here. We're still finding new passages and still exploring it. Still not really sure how big the cave is going to be once we're finally done. Cave exploring a river cave is a real challenge because while, for instance, a lot of the parts of Mammoth are high and dry, in this one you've got to worry about flooding, you've got to worry about crawling through passages where the water may be up to your neck.
So what are we looking at right here? This looks like an old pump system of some kind.
Yeah, the first people that came to Horse Cave, they located their homes here for a reason, because here in the Barrens of central Kentucky, we've got so many caves and sinkholes that the water doesn't stay on the surface. A lot of it goes underground, and if you're going to build a community, you have to have drinking water. So for the people that got here early on, that got their that were located along the edges of the major rivers like the Barren River or the Green River, they had plenty of water from the river. But if you were coming along a little bit later, you needed to find a cave spring or a sinkhole with access to water. And so Horse Cave was one of those natural access points where you could actually get to the underground water. We don't even know how Horse Cave got its name. It may have been just because the word horse means big.
Like Hoss.
Yeah, yeah. But it may have also been an early horse well, which is a well that used the power of horses to draw the water up. And at any rate, people began building their houses around the cave entrance. There were some early well systems that were put in to draw the water up. And then around the 1870s, the Thomas family moved here from upstate New York. Now, they were a fairly influential, wealthy family. They had, I'm told they had fancy ideas, like the women smoked cigarettes and wore long pants, which you didn't do in those days. But Dr. Thomas brought in, his dad, G.A. Thomas, and his son, Harry, brought a lot of interesting expertise to the area. They were dentists, and they built the old Victorian house right above the cave, ran their dental practice there, and they turned the cave into a tourist attraction, but they also dammed up the river here in the cave, put in a turbine and a water pumping system, and began pumping the water out of the cave, hooked up a hydroelectric system to the cave, and they were powering their dentist drills with the cave water.
Oh, that's amazing.
They set up the
I would not want to have my tooth worked on by a drill that was powered by hydroelectric from this cave. It had to run really slowly.
I don't know if I'd want to have my teeth worked on by a dentist that loved cavities that much.
Right.
There you go.
So this thing dates back quite like how many decades here?
This is probably 1890s. This is one of the later pumps.
It's pretty well preserved, I have to say. They certainly knew how to get their iron out of the ground after the Civil War, didn't they? Probably like, what, a quarter of a mile or less back in here.
Yeah.
But you can go beyond here 4 miles or
we
like that?
have 2-hour, 3-hour, and 5-hour adventure tours where if you really want to get muddy and be underground for a long time, you can do it here.
You know, I spent a significant portion of my youth crawling through Saltpeter Cave in Barron County, way back in there. It was a lot of fun.
Real familiar with that one.
It was dangerous enough, I guess, at least not always having a map out, but this looks like a very adventuresome wild cave tour here.
Yeah, this is a huge cave. This is actually one of the larger, in terms of commercially open caves to the public, this is the largest one outside of Mammoth Cave.
Wow. It looks like if you just begin the cave tour here, you're kind of crawling up something like I would see out in the desert Southwest.
Oh yeah, well you can see there where we actually had to dig footholds in the mud to be able to climb up this slope.
I love it. And you have people climbing up and sliding down and and coming out really, really muddy, I bet.
Yeah, it's a challenge. You come out and it's a very big cave. I mean, there's a lot of places you can get lost in here. So,
of course,
you want to go with a guide.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for showing us the farthest depths of the cave as far as we can walk. Maybe we should head on out and see the light of day again.
Sounds good.
All right.